Welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to continue with the series of tutorials that we're doing on Excel Power Pivot. So in the previous tutorial, we created some additional fields. We got our sales field, our cost field, we got our profit field. But what if you want to now start doing some tables of data, some aggregations? What if you start wanting to work with this data? So we're going to see that we actually use our pivot tables and our pivot charts in Excel to be able to do this. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you some of the basics of using your pivot tables and your pivot charts. But please note that we do have an entire series of tutorials just on pivot tables as well. There's a lot that you can really do with pivot tables, so please look out for those. But yet again, please remember to subscribe and to like the channel. But let's jump into the tutorial. I will see you there. Welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to continue with the series of tutorials that we've been putting together for Excel Power Pivot. So if you've been following the tutorials, so far you should have got your data into Power Pivot. And also in the last tutorial, we created some new fields. So we created a sales field, a cost field, and a profit field. And basically we did some simple calculations using the fields that were already in the table. Now what I want to look at in this tutorial is we're going to see how do we present this data, how do we do some data analysis using the data that is now within your Power Pivot. And the way that we do that is actually through your pivot tables. So we're pretty much going to use your standard pivot tables with a few changes that are in Excel. Now, if you look and you're still in your Power Pivot and you go across to your pivot table options in your ribbon, if you select that and click on the drop down, you'll see a number of different types of options you've got in terms of creating pivot tables or pivot charts. So we're going to look at different options with this. We're going to look at pivot table, pivot charts, but you can see you can also have combination options as well. So to start with, we're going to choose the pivot table. So we're going to select pivot table. And what it's going to do now is it's going to go back into your Excel and it's actually going to create the pivot table within your Excel. So in this case, it wants to know, are we creating a new worksheet for this? I'm going to click on OK. And you can see it's given it a new worksheet number. Now, if you're familiar with pivot tables, then you'll know how this works in terms of the fact that we're going to create the pivot table from the fields that are over here. But if you're not familiar with pivot tables, I'll just give you a quick little crash course. So basically, your pivot table is actually a component that is within your sheet. If you go off the pivot table, you're basically just working with your normal spreadsheet. So basically, these are just cells within your spreadsheet. If you go back into the pivot table again, you'll see now that you get the pivot table fields to work with. Once you're on your pivot table as well, you do get additional menu options. So you'll see that you get your pivot table analyze and you get your pivot table design menu options as well. So just be aware those are there. If we go across here, a bit of a change when it comes to Power Pivot is the ability to have multiple tables that you can use within your pivot tables. So basically you can have an active table or you can have all the tables that you're working with. In this case, we've currently only got one table at the moment. And later on tutorials, we will be working with more than one table. But for now, we just got one table. So when I open this, you can see when I expand it, I get all of my fields that are now listed. Now, like normal Excel pivot tables, often a good thing to do is to go to your settings. And you may want to change this order to be A to Z. So we're going to say A to Z here. It just makes the fields much easier to understand where they are in terms of being from A to Z rather than in data source order. Okay, so once we've now got our pivot table, basically the way we construct a pivot table is to be able to use our rows, columns, and values. So let's create a simple one. Let's use our sub-region, which is actually a list of our countries. We'll drop that into our rows. And basically all you do is a drag and drop. Just drag it, drop it into rows, and you'll see now it will go through your data source, all 61,000 rows, and it will pull out all the unique countries that are in the table. So that's a list of all the unique countries that we've got at the moment within the data source. We can also have values. So if I look and I've got my sales value, I can click on that and I can drag and drop that and then I can place it into my values as well. So once I drop that, you'll see by default what it's done is it's created a sum of sales. So basically now on the pivot table, we've now got the sum of sales. You can see that this isn't particularly easy to read. It's got some bad formatting. We don't have thousand separators. We got too many decimals as well. So what you can do is you can right click on this and this will bring up a context sensitive menu. And you could say, I want to just see the number formatting and we could change that. So in this case, we're going to say number. We're going to say we don't want any decimal places. We're going to use the thousand separator and click OK on that. And you can see that's far easier to read. So basically you can pull multiple fields in here. You could have your profit field in here. And again, you'll see that you get your sum of your profit. Again, if you want to do your formatting, just right click on it, number format, go to your number, 0 decimal places, use thousand separator, click OK. Now, one thing I do want to show you though is it's a bit of a pain every time, because if we clear this, let's say we take out our sum of our profit and we take out of our sum of our sales, and we pull back in our sales, you'll see now that it goes back to being not formatted. So one of the key things that you can do is you can actually format it in your data model. So let's keep that there where it is at the moment. We're going to go back to our data model. So make sure you're on your Power Pivot menu, go back to your Manage Data Model, and we're going to go back to our sales field. And you just click on your sales field, and what you'll see is that you actually get formatting within Power Pivot. So we're going to say we want to make this 1000 separator, and you'll see now that it's added the 1000 separator in there, and we've also got decimals. So let's say that we now remove those decimals. So we just decrease the decimals. So now we've formatted this field. Okay, let's go back to our Excel. And the way you can do that is you can click on this little icon to switch to the workbook, or you could actually just go back to Excel itself by clicking on the Excel sheet. Let's click on this little icon, and then we go back, and now you can see that the sum of sales is actually formatted. However, if we pull in our profit, you'll see that our profit is not formatted. So again, we could go back to Manage Data Model, go to our profit, we could format that, and we could remove that. I can do my cost as well, just to make sure that's also formatted. And this tends to save you quite a lot of time when you've already got these formatted. Please note, it hasn't lost the decimals. It will still use it in the calculation. It's just when it comes to the formatting. Okay, so we're going to go back to Excel. Remember this little icon to switch to workbook. Select there, and there we go. We've now got this nicely formatted. Now, if you're also new to pivot tables, there's a few things that we can do with this. For example, if we didn't want to see this by our countries anymore, we could actually just drag this out. And we could say we would want to see this by our customer. You can drag and drop your customer in there. And now you'll see that you get your sum of your sales and your sum of your profit for each of your customers that are actually in the data set. Also, what you can do is you can use the columns. So I'm just going to simplify this. I'm going to take the profit out. Let's take the customer out. Let's go back to our sub-region or country. Drop that in rows. And let's say we use our business segment in our columns. Now what you'll see is that we get each of our business segments now being put into our columns. And again, you can see now that these calculations have been very quickly and very easily created. So you'll see that pivot tables are very quick at being able to create that. Okay, so that's basically our pivot tables for the moment. I do just want to spend a couple of quick minutes just talking about a pivot chart. So let's go back into our data model, go back to our manage, and we're going to go back to our pivot table. And you'll remember that we had the option for a pivot chart. So I'm going to select on pivot chart. I'm going to say that that's going to go into a new worksheet, click OK. And you'll see now that you get a pivot chart that is being created within your Excel. Again, now we can go back to our data. Remember as well, we can change the sort order for our fields. So let's say we want our business segment in our axis, and we get that across. And we want our sales values now in our values. And there we go, we can create a pivot chart very quickly and easily. Okay, so I'm going to conclude the tutorial there, and we will continue with the next tutorials. Hopefully I'll see you there.